Welcome to the Grand Finals of HomeStory Cup 26. I know what you're thinking. A Protoss? In the Grand Finals of a major StarCraft tournament? You're right, that hasn't happened in years. Spotting right here, in the top left-hand corner, in game number 1, on a map called Whispers of Gold. Playing with the blue Protoss pieces, we have none other than Clem. Clem, the world champion of StarCraft 2. He's a Terran player. He decided to play Protoss this entire Grand Finals. His opponent, down in the bottom right, the winner of HomeStory Cup 25, looking to go back-to-back with the red SCVs. We're looking at GuMiho's main command center. Now, this series, as of me casting it, was played, what is it, like maybe 28 hours or something? I don't know how many hours. It hasn't been that long. The thing is, I was one of the casters for this tournament. In case you're unfamiliar, HomeStory Cup, it is right across the German border for me. I've been going to that event pretty much every single time. I had to skip one since like 2017. I've been going there every single time. And obviously because of that, I already know what ended up going down in this series. The thing is, I know that a lot of people may not have been able to catch these games live. And I figured there are still plenty of you interested in watching some high-level StarCraft 2. So hopefully, me knowing the series doesn't really ruin it to anybody. I'm hopefully going to be able to go maybe a bit more in detail with some of the strategies that these players decide to go for. Because I gotta be honest with you, I am very impressed with the way that Clem played Protoss. So this is not Clem being a bit of a meme, okay? He's not just, trying to have some fun, and he's not, not taking it serious. This is definitely a Clem who wants to win the entire tournament. He did win a stay at HomeStory Cup during COVID, but other than that, Clem has never actually won a HomeStory Cup before, so he is certainly taking this serious, and he's not just memeing around. Here's the thing, at HomeStory Cup, the new multiplayer balance patch really came, like, it went live just a couple days before this tournament actually took place. And Clem is somebody who's extremely good, but also somebody who I think needs a little bit of time to adjust to a patch. He already played against GuMiho this particular tournament, and GuMiho trashed him. He decided to play Terran versus Terran against GuMiho, and GuMiho was just a step ahead. GuMiho is one of the very best Terran players, obviously, on the planet. His TVT has always been good, and it's clear that he really understands the Cyclone better than anybody else right now. So obviously, the Cyclone has gone through a lot of changes. It's once again back to the version that we used to have in the, earlier days of StarCraft 2. We've reverted a couple of different versions of the Cyclone, compared to at least where we used to be. And it certainly showed that GuMiho has a really good understanding of Terran versus Terran, better than the other Terran players out there. For example, in the past, we used to see a lot of Marine Tank. Marine Tank has been the go-to unit comp in Terran versus Terran. GuMiho was playing a lot of Cyclone Viking-based unit compositions instead, and it was clear that Clem just couldn't really deal with it. Now, it's also important to note, as we do have the first Cyclone now coming across, this is additional Reapers on the back of this, so these adepts do have to be careful. Okay, he decides to commit. Nice targeting right there on one of those adepts. Good grenades as well, though. Okay, one adept goes down in exchange for 2 Reapers. Not the end of the world, but this means that GuMiho is going to be able to go across the map. Important to note that Clem's, his Protoss MMR is about 6.8k. 6.8k is just below the absolute highest level. Like, if you're reaching 7k MMR, like that is where Clem's Terran is at, you're in the absolute upper echelons. 6.8k is significantly above Protoss players that I cast on my YouTube channel all the time. So Clem has decided to play Protoss here, mostly because he's not confident in his Terran versus Terran against GuMiho, who's of course known as the Gumi God, one of the most, creative Terran players on the planet. And yeah, there's no denying that it created a bit of a banger series. And all memes aside, even though it's been a long time since we had Protoss in the Grand Finals of a real tournament, there's, no denying that Clem may just be the Protoss hope. As weird as it is to say that, Clem is certainly ranked amongst the very best Protoss players on the planet. Alrighty, so here we go. GuMiho is going to follow this up right now with a Marine Tank push. The Hellions from earlier, the one Reaper from earlier, they're going to be coming across the map too. Clem wants to go into a 3rd Nexus right now, as he's expanding off of a triple gate. This is one of the strategies that has become the gold standard. Of course, one of the reasons why it's the gold standard is because Clem ended up defeating Max Packs many times over the last couple months, whenever Clem decided to go for like a double, Max Packs decided to go for like a double gate opener. So it's been determined over the last little while, then the triple gateway is the way to go. The siege tank push over here is creating a distraction now for those Hellions to drive into the natural expansion. GuMiho is dealing quite a bit of damage, but he's also losing most of the troops in the process. This is 6 probes going down, but it wasn't free. A siege tank down here is actually quite significant because it means that the Stalker counterattack can start dealing quite a bit of damage. Medevac did manage to sneak away. That's an important tool as well. There's 1 siege tank set up right now at home. 3rd Nexus is, of course, still alive. We do not have a prism or anything like that on the back of this, so Clem can certainly commit to an attack, but he needs to be careful. Then again, there's a lot of micro potential in these early game units. A couple of barracks coming up right now. 2nd siege tank over there in the back of the main base as well. Aggressive blink forward. This is a high ground vision right now granted by the observer. Another siege tank goes down. In the meantime, a Raven decided to fly across the map, and this is one of those things that we have seen deal a lot of damage, of course, over the course of the game. Already, though, a couple Stalkers here waiting. And these tiny moves here with 2 Stalkers waiting, it shows a very deep understanding of Terran, right? Like, obviously, Clem, he knows how Terran normally performs, what Terrans usually are thinking. He was already anticipating that, indeed, that Raven would be coming in, and he gets a little bit of damage done on the other side of the map. Now, by the way, this is a best of 5 series. If Clem ends up winning it, we get another best of 3 on the back of it. If GuMiho wins the best of 5, that's it. That's the grand finals over. The reasoning is that GuMiho came from the upper bracket, whereas Clem came from the lower bracket, meaning that GuMiho performed a little bit better overall. There's a couple of different ways that you can do a double elimination bracket rather than just running a straight best of 7. This is the format that they decided to go with at HomeStory Cup. So a best of 5 first. If GuMiho wins, that's it. If Clem wins, we play one more best of 3 to decide it all. Auto turret gets dropped down again, but the shield battery is going to be able to push this away for now. Then again, it doesn't have infinite energy. 4th Nexus coming up on the back of this. Another Marine drop, though, in the main base. And this is a big one. GuMiho realized the soft contain right here that these Stalkers were creating. Pylon goes down. 8 probes go down as well. Nice force field over here, though. Gonna try and see if we can push away that medevac for now, but nice move right there by GuMiho. He's gonna continue piling on the pressure right now with a Raven as well. That's 10 workers going down in total. So 16 probes right now throughout the entirety of the game. That is a substantial amount, but then again, Clem has had more economy here for longer. And he's already going into that 4th Nexus here too, so he's actually in a nice spot. You do have to always be a bit careful though, because Stimpack is finishing, Combat Shields is finishing, and then +1 infantry attacks as well. Those 3 upgrades are going to be absolutely massive when GuMiho decides to move across the map, which is going to be right about right now. We do have a Robo Bay on the back of this for Clem, not opting to go into the Quick Storm, which is something we've been seeing quite a bit over the last week or so. Instead, we're going to be going into what seems to be Colossi, but of course those Colossi are still a while away. That means that Clem is going to have to clean up this attack mostly just with Blink Stalkers and a whole lot of charge slots. That's the plan. A Colossus can be nice, but it's going to be a while until it will actually be available. Prism, though, is now also out. This is Clem mostly trying to buy time. He's trying to make sure that Terran does not move out with the entirety of their army, because if you do, there's going to be Zealots inside of your mineral line and maybe a continued warp in as well. So let's get dropped off, pick back up. Medevacs waste a little bit of energy. GuMiho does not yet know about the 4th Nexus. He checked over here. He assumed that that is where it was going to be. Clem obviously knows that's where Terran players assume the 4th is going to be, so he decided to plant it down in the horizontal location instead. Terran is still sieged up over here. This is one of those moves that Clem is also very fond of. Well, he decides to collapse on top of this Terran army, but I don't think there's quite enough units. Prism, in the meantime, is taking damage from the Viking, and GuMiho is going to be able to clean this up. No problem. Mostly just using his army right now to secure a 3rd. Rather than doubling down on the aggression. Right now he may be feeling compelled to move across, but rather than being chased around by the Prism too much and having some of his attention split, he decided to just siege up over at the 3rd base, secure that one, and he actually got quite a few units right there for free. That's going to make this follow-up attack quite a bit more dangerous, but of course, in the meantime, there has been enough time to get those Colossi out. It is absolutely critical, though, that Clem slows this down to the best of his abilities. Because if Terran just drives up to the fourth base and sieges, that's massive. Nice targeting right here on those Vikings. One more Viking remains. Okay. That means that the Colossus, well, it doesn't quite have free reign. But there's no easy counter right now. Obviously, Marauders can still get close. Siege Tank now within range of some of those units. And GuMiho is trying to split these units up. He now realizes that indeed that fourth base was taken right over there. Blink forward once again. Siege Tank goes down. Nice target firing right here by the French Terran player? Can we call him that? I don't know. Nice control here by GuMiho as well, though. Splitting up all of his units, mitigating a ton of that splash damage. Marauders are really the only thing that remain. A couple of Zealots here in front. Keep in mind that we don't have a shield battery overcharge anymore. So you have to be very careful here as Protoss. But Clem holds. And that is absolutely critical there. Does not really lose any additional economy. That Raven has also gone down. Maybe it got all army hotkeyed, or maybe it was just targeted there by those stalkers. Either way, Clem actually survives that. And that is this was a lovely example of something that most Protoss players would not be able to survive. How many games have I casted over the last few months where Protoss falls a little bit behind in the early game and then they just sort of die? Now this is, right over here, an absolute monster drop from GuMiho. He split up his units, splits up Clem's attention, and the drop in the main base kills the pylon once more. Nexus itself goes down, and a couple of probes that are sleeping on the job are also gonna find their grave here. In the meantime, though, Clem is hunting down the rest of those units that were serving as a distraction. Another Viking goes down, a Medevac here. There's one more, actually, almost full of units. If you can snipe that one, too, that would be massive. Those Marines, though, and Marauders, yeah, they are gonna be pushed away now. That, oof, he does get one of the Medevacs. Now that the recall completes towards the natural, Clem is going to try and see if he can get rid of those units, but he did take a substantial amount of damage at home. Then again, he also did clear out a lot of those Terran army units. Combat shields, Guardian shields here getting activated. One more of the Marauders will end up going down, and even though it's been a little bit of a back and forth, GuMiho still secures a really nice army advantage here. And even though, obviously, he hasn't had the biggest economy, he's going to be slightly ahead in that department. Fifth Nexus coming up on the right side of the map, too. So Clem just taking all the horizontal bases. Usually not what Protosses do. Usually you want to be able to, like, obviously Protoss has the slowest moving army. Maybe not so much this one, but Protoss in general not as flexible in my mind as Terran, and especially Zerg. So usually you want to keep your army and your bases because of it in one big clump, so you can actually defend a little bit easier. Another Medevac drop, though, moving on over towards that main base. Planetary Fortress coming up at the bottom of the map. A couple of the Colossi over here also do find quite an interesting setup. Yeah, those Marines and Marauders were trying to dodge the lasers of the Colossi, but they couldn't really run any other direction other than towards the top right-hand corner. And that means that they're gonna get chased to death. In the meantime, Medevac drop over inside of the main base is going quite well as well, and there's not enough for that Colossus to go down. Those Colossi are getting extreme value because they're actually being microed. That almost sounds mean to say, but there's usually not nearly as much control on the Colossi as what we're seeing right here from Clem. Keeping them alive for an extended period of time, and now he's feeling like he can actually push forward over here. Not a lot of Vikings up in the air because the target firing from those Vikings, or from those Stalkers onto the Vikings, has been really solid. SCVs are dying over at the third base. Clem is taking a very significant supply advantage. GG gets called, and Clem wins game number 1. Next up, we find ourselves on ley lines. Game number 2 in this best of 5. Again, if Clem ends up winning the best of 5, we're playing one more best of 3 to decide the grand finals. If GuMiho wins the best of 5, that's him as victor of HomeStory Cup 26. This has, by the way, been a very stacked HomeStory Cup. All the best players were here. Even Maru decided to come out for his very first HomeStory Cup. So it took 26 editions before Maru decided to come all the way from South Korea to beautiful Krefeld in Germany. Sarah was, of course, there as well. I mean, I've got a lot of really good games to go ahead and cast over the next couple days. Next couple of weeks, really. So if you're watching this on YouTube, maybe you're new, do make sure you hit that subscribe button. if you really want to help me out. The easiest way to go ahead and do so is hitting that like button down below. I know it's a little annoying, but it really does help. You can smash it, click it, whatever you can do. It is interesting, though, to have a world champion Terran playing Protoss now. And I'm actually kind of excited to see, like, the Battle.net forums and the StarCraft 2, you know, StarCraft 2 subreddit trying to wrap their heads around this, because there's been a lot of whining about Protoss, there's been a lot of whining about Terran, there's also been a lot of whining about Zerg, to be fair, but it is a little bit confusing, a little bit conflicting. If you've been like a lifelong Terran whiner, or a lifelong Protoss, how do you deal with this? How do you cope with the #1 Terran on the planet switching to Protoss because he is not feeling confident in Terran versus Terran? How do we... I don't know, man. I'm looking forward to some of the meltdowns that are unlikely or undoubtedly going to happen over the next couple weeks. Because I'm pretty sure there will be some people that will just not be able to process this very easily. Anyways, so far, very normal builds. Although GuMiho has decided to go for the cheeky little command center in the main base. Obviously, GuMiho is well aware with the European Protosses. And he knows that sometimes, well, also the Korean ones, they like to mix in some proxy gates. We sometimes see the original max specs build. Generally speaking, though, these days, it's the double gate opener. You can proxy a gateway on the other side of the map. You can even proxy multiple gateways on the other side of the map if you really want to. And, well, when you're leading the series 1-0, it is not all too unlikely. Clem did mention several times, by the way, that he is a big fan of the Blink Stalker opener. He doesn't feel too confident, it seems, in opening, like, Stargate in this matchup. He likes Stargate in Protoss versus Zerg. But for, yeah, Protoss versus Terran, he much prefers playing the Blinky Boys. Because the Blinky Boys feel like Terran units, right? In general, he is obviously a very aggressive player in every single matchup. And usually the Stargate builds, especially for, yeah, Protoss versus Terran, like if you play, like, Mass Phoenix, for example, it is usually a lot more laid back, and it's just not really Clem's playstyle. Of course, Clem also has an awful lot of practice against max specs over the last year. As they, well, the last 3 years or so, as they've been going back and forth and back and forth. And honestly, lately, he seems to be losing more so than winning. At least in the most recent encounters that I've seen him have against max specs. So he's got a lot of practice against very aggressive Protoss players too, so I'm sure he knows what it feels like as Terran. I can imagine also GuMiho does not quite have nearly as much of that. Where, yeah, Protoss players usually do chill a little bit more with their Stalkers, you know? Like, they're not gonna take as many jumps, or when they do, they make mistakes. Cyclone at this point is out. So this is the reverted Cyclone, the one that has a gajillion range with that lock-on ability. And also the one that is currently bugged on the ladder. To clarify, this is played on a fixed version of the multiplayer balance patch. In case you're unfamiliar, currently, and I'm hoping by the time I upload this on YouTube, which will be tomorrow, currently, there is a bugged version on the ladder where the Cyclone deals about 25% more damage than it's supposed to. So there's a lot of Terran players currently in Grandmaster League. Their MMR is inflated by like 500, maybe 1,000 points. Mostly because the Cyclone deals way too much damage. This is played on a fixed version, the intended version of the patch. We do have a cheeky little Marine drop once again making its way inside of the main base. The Cyclone was kept at home for base defense for now. You will see once more, though, at this point, GuMiho that this is going to be a Stalker opener. No Phoenix spotted yet, and the Phoenix would already be out. So he knows that this is going to be Blink again. It is going to be Triple Gate. Triple Gate, Prism into an Observer on the back of this. In the meantime, it's Triple Rex here as well for GuMiho, so he's going to be able to go into all of his beloved upgrades eventually. But a bit of a deviation. Medevac drop. Rather than going home after being pushed back by those Stalkers, decides to stick around. And I remember this game very clearly. That little group of Marines, don't forget them. Don't forget the Marines. Alright, we have a third Nexus over here, attempted at least by Clem. Stalkers are gonna go in. Clem is feeling like he can actually get a big blink in. Saves 2 Stalkers, 3 Stalkers, but 2 has already gone down in exchange of a single siege tank. Marines in the meantime over here trying to be a little bit annoying. Stalkers do continue. There's that lock-on, but good pickup control right here by Clem as he's trying to get all these Stalkers out. He needs to try and drop off the weakened ones in the front. Picks up the weakened ones from the back. Well, in the meantime, also defending at home. Couple Stalkers over here trying to keep this army at bay. Aggressive siege up by GuMiho is doing a good job maneuvering around as he actually decides, or at least he's thinking about going across the map right now. Oh, good blink. Lovely blink right there by Clem. Picks up the weakened Stalkers again. And this is so smooth. Like, the Stalker control is not perfect, right? But there are moments where you look at this Stalker you control and you're like, oh, this is possible. Like, we see this from, for example, MaxPax, but MaxPax doesn't play offline tournaments. It is very smooth. With a little bit more practice, Clem can be an absolute monster in this situation. Now, while he's pushing on the other side of the map, those Marines are back for more. 5 probes end up going down. A couple of Stalkers over here are finding their graves. Good targeting error as well. Nice micro here, actually, by GuMiho. Using the maximum range of those units. 5 additional probes go down. You can see an all-army hotkey here by Clem. Bit of an uncharacteristic thing. He doesn't usually do this with Terran very much. Or at least not in a noticeable way. Yeah, obviously, Clem will play a bunch of Protoss, but it's not like he's playing, you know, Protoss every day. Or at least not nearly as much as he's playing Terran. What can the man do when he commits a couple months? Okay, good targeting right here. And those couple of Marines have really slowed down the economy of Clem quite a bit. GuMiho, though, has decided that since he knows that there's not that much Protoss, he's gonna try and see if he can get, well, the critical hit on the other side of the map. He brings SCVs across too. Psionic Storm this time around on the back it is for Clem. The upgrade is just about to finish up, but it does take quite a long time. How many Templar are there? There's 4 of them. Obviously no Ghost yet, and at this point I don't think GuMiho knows that it's High Templar, although, okay, he's got a glimpse of it, so he's already pre-splitting those units. You can tell here, by the way, that he's not really focused on killing that third. He wants to kill, well, the Protoss player here altogether. Storms are going to be absolutely critical. He gets 1 decent storm down, 2nd decent storm down. Stalkers blink forward, targets fires down that first siege tank. But there is just not that much Protoss on the ground remaining. And while that was about the best case scenario... Oh my god, well, the probes are going in. Now, that was about the best case scenario for Clem. Ultimately, he just does not have the numbers. Next up, we find ourselves on Frostline. Curious to see where we're gonna be in a couple of years from now. Because pretty much all the top level players have been playing their off races to a certain extent. So most tournaments will allow you to switch race between games if you want to. There are some tournaments that will, I guess, at least in the past, there were tournaments that would force you to play only Protoss or Terran or Zerg. But I'm pretty sure for most events out there, you can switch race if you want to. So Clem could decide to play Terran here in the 3rd game of the series. He decides to stick around with Protoss instead. But I feel like that would be StarCraft 2. Like, if you think about this, that would, in my mind, be StarCraft 2 in its ultimate form. When all pro gamers can play all races, or at least 2 of them. We've obviously seen, for example, Raynar play quite a bit of Protoss. We've seen Serral play a bit of Terran. Apparently, Maru's Protoss is absolute top tier as well. Now we have Clem playing a little bit of it. If every player, like say every player at the highest level could play 2 races at a competent pro level, that could really shake up a lot of stuff, right? Because, for example, map vetoes right now are done specifically for a matchup. Especially now that we have 9 maps in the map pool, you could have some more experimental maps out there. Maps that are really good for specific matchups, but not for others. You could see a lot of development on maps as well over time, but if players switch races, you could... like, it's an extra layer of strategy. There's also technically another layer of randomness, which I know a lot of, well, StarCraft pro gamers won't like so much. Right? You can't really anticipate your opponent as much if you don't know what race they're going to be playing. That seems to be quite important. But it is an interesting time. If everybody could play multiple races, say like GuMiho felt confident playing Zerg here, we could actually, as we do have a recall on that probe, by the way, we could actually have a Zerg versus Protoss all of a sudden. That would be so weird. If it's a GuMiho versus Clem game, but it's actually a Protoss versus Zerg. I don't think that's very likely. I think most players will probably be happy to play 2 races. But obviously PvZ Protoss versus Zerg is not a matchup that either GuMiho or Clem will be as comfortable with. I mean, the question is always, who's the very best player in StarCraft 2 when it comes to playing random? It's probably Clem. It's probably Serral. It's probably Maru. It's one of those guys, you know? Even though random is not commonly played on the ladder at the highest level, the top players are good. Believe it or not, the top level StarCraft players are good at playing StarCraft. Yeah, not just their race. They're just good at playing games. There's a lot of skill, obviously, that carries over. Nice little Reaper snipe right here. Gets one probe for the time being. Looking for that second one as well. He wants to see exactly what he's playing against, but ooh, nice little bit of diving right there by the Gumi God. Good control on the Reaper. He's going to be able to keep it alive. He hasn't seen exactly what he's playing against, but I think at this point he's starting to realize that Clem doesn't really play anything other than Blinky Boys. At least in the earlier stages of the match. Cyclone coming up once again. It does seem, by the way, that this version of the Cyclone is really freaking good. Yeah, we've seen a lot of games. So I brought up Terran versus Terran and the Cyclone Viking-based unit comps that we've seen quite a bit. I think it's also going to change Terran versus Zerg quite drastically. We've been seeing a lot of Terran mech, for example, against Zerg. We've seen a lot of Zerg build orders too now with the new patch that just are completely different. I want to make a video about that as well over the next couple days, specifically about Elaser strats, because his strats in TVZ and ZVT and Zerg vs Protoss, they've been just amazing. I don't know if they're good, but they have been interesting. He's doing a lot of like 3 queen and 4 queen openers. One of the adepts here in a little bit of trouble. Anyways, the new patch, even though all the changes are relatively minor, everything combined is creating some very drastic changes. It's a good time to be a StarCraft fan. Anyways, Marine drop once more coming in. This has been one of GuMiho's main plays, right? So every time there seems to be a medevac full of Marines, sometimes a Cyclone with a bunch of Marines added, right? If this can kill a couple of probes and he can slow down the Protoss economy, it can very quickly win him the game a couple of minutes later. This is also the problem that a lot of the less successful Protoss players over the last year or so seem to be dealing with, where just like one medevac full of Marines kills like 8 probes and then you die to the Marine Marauder. Yeah, just a follow-up push with Stimpack and combat shields. There's a lot of attacks that can just really destroy a Protoss player in particular. So far though, Clem seems to be all over it. He's decided to go for a very quick charge follow-up too, as GuMiho is already ready to go across the map. So there's just a good old 1-1-1 right here. It is a Siege Tank Marine push. Ooh, medevac! Okay. Does get targeted down. In the meantime, the Cyclone also falls. Lovely control right there by Clem, who's forcing those tanks right now to siege up. Gets a couple of Marines. And look at this. Not a single Stalker has gone down. Well, at least up until just now. Sorry about that, buddy. But that was some really lovely control. You see that little bit of micro right there on those Stalkers? Oh, this is something Clem loves to do. So Clem is making the assumption right now that Protoss is moving back. Or sorry, that Terran is moving back here. But it's a random siege up here by GuMiho. Clem is not going to walk through the center path here because he knows that there's a chance that we have a random siege up. That little bit of Stalker micro though was absolutely critical. If he would not have been able to do that, the push with the medevac, the Cyclone added in, if the siege tank could just drive straight over towards, like, that would have been game over. Your micro has to be very clean, and so far it seems like Clem does have what it takes. GuMiho is forced to retreat. He did go Stimpack and combat shields and +1 on the back of this, but of course the start base is relatively late. We're now 6.5 minutes in. This is not going to be able to achieve too much, and in this particular situation, this is also a bit of a different follow-up right now from Clem. Rather than going really quick Colossi on the back of this, he's going full Gateway Man. So we're going, yeah, mostly just Gateway-based units. Stalkers and Zealots. No messing around. This is GuMiho fishing over here for free Stalkers. The siege tanks, by the way, ignore this little... They can't blow themselves up, okay, by shooting at the wall here. They ignore that little section. Couple of Vikings trying to escape. Another medevac here. Trying to see if it can make its way across the map too, and it's being led by a couple of those Vikings. At the very least, keeping an eye out for the medevac. Now we have a Robo Bay on the back of this. Another 4th Nexus. This is reminding me a lot of game number 1. Very similar setup here. Except, of course, Clem had already taken quite a bit of damage at that point, or at this point, rather, in the game. In this particular situation, he hasn't yet. Now, this medevac over here is indeed not spotted, and GuMiho is going to be able to see this base. Is he going to be able to shut it down? Already, a large group of zealots was making its way across. And this is really lovely right here for Clem. This is at the very beginning of when Protoss can really start rolling ahead in this matchup. Obviously, it's still hanging on by a thread, but GuMiho needs to get something done here in the relatively near future, because otherwise he's just going to get overwhelmed. Well, Clem is thinking about maybe moving up towards the high ground. Frostline, though, does have a really nice siege tank spot over here. That ramp is also, of course, really nice. Zealots here coming in from the right side, too. This pushover at the front is mostly just a distraction. 8 SCVs go down. It's not over yet, as we have another warping of zealots here. Terran apparently not respecting this enough, and Clem looks at it, he's thinking, yo, just reinforcements are going to be nice, but it's going to be a while until they show up. That's going to be a lot of SCV losses, and some Marines and Marauders on the back of this too. He's thinking about setting up a big surround here, but those siege tanks are still keeping this Terran army, well, relatively safe. There's an observer seeing all of this as well for Clem. This is absolute domination so far here by the French Protoss. Dark Shrine on the back of this. Colossi on the back of this. I feel like the Dark Shrine is a little bit risky, because this is a lot of resources caught up in things that won't really help him out too much. But Clem is feeling like he can get the job done here. Couple of zealots denying mining over at the 3rd base. And we rarely see Protoss played like this. Like, this is very clean. Now, this is still a very scary attack, though. GuMiho's army is massive. Clem decides to just simply jump right on top of it. A Colossus coming in from the north as well. Siege tanks are not going to be able to maximize their damage. And this is utter destruction. GG. Next up, we find ourselves on Amygdala. Or as some casters apparently call it, Amygdala. Welcome to Amygdala. Apparently this is the only map in the current map pool that we could possibly be mispronouncing, okay? The other maps are too easy, so Amygdala it is. Everybody knows StarCraft casters are terrible at pronouncing map names. Yeah. Amy first name, Gadala surname. Look at her tentacles. This is, of course, the changed version of the map with these rocks that bleed out over time. At the 8-minute mark, these rocks will have disappeared. GuMiho has decided that this is how we're going to start things off. A single proxy Rex on the other side of the map. This map has actually been pretty interesting. So most StarCraft maps have lots of paths to get across the map, right? You have lots of different ways that you can go across. At the bare minimum, we usually have 3 right now. On this map, though, I mean, in the late game, you have about a dozen. But in the early game, there's really only 2. So either the probe, it scouts through the northern section all the way around all those rocks, or it does the same path, but towards the south. There's really only 2 paths, and it's creating some interesting early game dynamics. I've been liking it especially for the Zerg matchups, because Zerg will have a lot of like early game vision, right? If you see one path, for example, you see the Hellions going this way. Say you have an Overlord over here somewhere, you see Hellions going south on this side. You know that your army is safe to go around the north and vice versa. There's a lot of interesting dynamics there. Anyhow. You can certainly get some cheeses to work. For now, though, it's just gonna be a good old Reaper. This is not too committed from GuMiho. He's following this up with double gas at home and then a relatively quick factory. And we're gonna be just using this early game Reaper to potentially get some damage in. The idea, of course, is that Clem is very comfortable, it seems, playing straight up StarCraft against Terran. However, how well does he do against some of the less common strategies? And this is clever thinking by GuMiho. So obviously GuMiho has realized now that Clem's Protoss is not a meme, right? Like, Clem's Protoss is really good. However, a lot of StarCraft players are really good when they get to play the game that they have been practicing. But as soon as the strategies are a little bit different, the responses are not ones that you normally see, it requires a lot more hours of practice before you learn how to deal with all of those optimally. And what are the odds that Clem is going to be very comfortable playing these, well, weird games instead? The games that have slightly different timings, where the strategies are just not as clear-cut. Second barracks right now on the back of this here for GuMi. First barracks is going to go back inside of the main base. We have the Cyclone here coming up as well. There's the third barracks starting up. So this is... I wouldn't call it like an uncommon build order from Terran against Protoss, but it is certainly not as common as the quote-unquote standard. This is a much later starport and much quicker additional marine production. It's something that can deal an awful lot of damage if you are not entirely prepared for it. And I like this. I like this strategy here from GuMiho, mostly because it's very strong, right? It's by default a very good build. Against like the very best Protoss players on the planet, you can rarely go wrong with a strategy like this. There's a fourth barracks even coming up right now on the back of this too. What are the odds though that Clem is going to be prepared against something like this? What are the odds that Clem has played against this sort of strategy repeatedly as well? Well, obviously Clem has got a very good understanding, from the Terran's point of view at least, as to what this sort of strategy does. But if he decides to autopilot and just do what he always does, if he goes for the same builds that he's been going for so far, there's a very good chance he can easily get overwhelmed. He needs to be paying close attention as to what's happening in this match. Now, how does he figure that out? You can go, of course, for like early game, for example, sentries. You can use that energy recharge ability right over here to get some early game hallucination scouts, but it's not something that Clem has been doing. So his first scout opportunity is likely going to be with the Robo facility and this observer that's coming up right now. It's critical that Clem figures out what he's playing against here ASAP, because otherwise, well, you can run into a whole world of issues. This is going to be a committed attack right here by GuMiho. He's going into Stimpack. We'll be seeing combat shields on the back of this. His third command center is not going to be starting up anytime soon. Instead, we're just going to see an awful lot of marine production. This map, by the way, does feel very large. Like, there's a lot of terrain to cover. So even though this observer is relatively quick, it does take a while for it to get in. He's going to scout. Okay, he sees that first barracks that has gone back home. But that's really all he sees here. Yeah, okay. He needs to go a little bit further. He sees a second barracks. He's scared, though. He knows that the Marines can hear that little sound. He doesn't want to get it to distract him. Obviously, at this point, Clem also realized that there's no medevac yet on the other side of the map. And without a medevac at this point, it is also a pretty clear indicator that it would be some sort of Marine-focused opener instead. But has he really deduced that this is the strategy he's going up against? He does see the move out now. That is a lot of siege tanks, though, for this point in the game. GuMiho is really looking to deal a significant amount of damage here. It is once more quick charge on the back of this. 4 additional gateways. We have the +1 ground weapons research here for Clem, who's going to try and see if he can slow down this Marine siege tank push. But honestly, those siege tanks need to be respected. Even unsieged, right? They can still deal a lot of damage right here to those stalkers. Charge is about 90% of the way done. There is a shield battery coming up. But GuMiho is looking to siege up within range right here of the Nexus, and it looks to me like he's got it. Yep, those tanks can start blasting away. Oh, okay. He decides to commit as soon as charge is done. Marines, though, are going to be able to stutter step using the tanks right here, well, as tanks. Not so much as splash damage, but to try and mitigate and tank as much of that damage as possible. The entire Protoss army pretty much disappears. GuMiho is going to move the tanks from the back. Yeah, decides to just move them a little bit closer here to the Nexus. And this base is in a world of trouble. Clever build order decision right here by GuMi. Proxy barracks into a 4-Rex push. It is not something we normally see. And while it still is very strong, and certainly something that Protoss can counter, Clem just does not have nearly as much experience playing this sort of strategy, or playing against this sort of strategy. Yeah, I mean, that's a nice force field, and quite a few zealots in the front, but those siege tanks and Marines are not messing around. There's an Immortal out right now too, which is nice to have, I suppose, but this is also something that will technically be a little bit stronger now with the removal of the shield battery overcharge. Energy overcharge is nice, but it's not as good at base defenses. Well, the shield battery overcharge would have been in this situation. Don't know if it would have made much of a difference, but GuMiho is already moving forward. There is a new Nexus, though, coming up over here on the left side of the map. GuMiho's army is still more than twice as big. The only problem here that he's running into is that there's a lot of units all over the map trying to make their way across. More siege tanks, yeah, are in trouble. The Zealots are going to be able to clean this up, it seems, eventually. Okay. Saves the Marines, at least. Pylon up north has gone down. Those Marines have now also found a couple of sentries. It's an ambitious play. Missed rally on those units, though, in the end. They should have been saved right there by one of the Medevacs. Clem decides to push this back even further. Medevacs are loaded up. And GuMiho actually has to retreat with his tail between his legs here. Okay. That is not what was supposed to happen right there. Clem pulling a rabbit out of a hat here, taking some interesting engagements. I didn't like the first one at all. I didn't love the second one. But the follow-ups have been good. The problem is this Terran army is still huge. The fact that Clem managed to clean that up in the first place is just speaking to how good his Protoss actually is. Okay, nice force fields here too. Siege tank gets picked off again. This is one of those things where Clem can make small adjustments and he would be in a significantly better situation right now. Chasing down those units. Robo Bay on the back it is too. Maybe that's actually the answer. Just going quicker into Colossi. Giving up that third base and remaking it on the left. Because all you're really limited by is time. GuMiho's third base is so late that obviously he needs to get something done. Finally it finishes, but I mean we're talking 9.5 minutes into the game. The main base is already starting to run out. +1 finally finishes though. GuMiho does already have a second NG bay. He already did make the armory, so he can make a transition towards 2-1. But I think the original intent here was to have already won the game by now. He's still in a good situation. Clem realizes it. He decides to restart that base at the 6 o'clock. Yeah, maybe 7 o'clock. He's remaking that expansion that he lost previously. Using the economy over here. Colossus is coming up. A ranged upgrade is coming up. Yeah, and the fact that Clem is actually not dead in this situation is impressive, all on its own. Here's the Terran units though. GuMiho has decided to group them up together for a bit, rather than bleeding out 1 or 2 Marines at a time. We've decided to regroup. I think there's enough Marines and Marauders to just tank most of this. Nice. Yeah, force fields though. Now the Colossus joins in as well. Sentry force fields are looking really nice. That energy recharge ability is allowing the Protoss player more energy on those sentries than what we normally see. And GuMiho needs to retreat, well, what seems to be once more. Then again though, those Marauders need to be respected. He grabs at least a couple more sentries on his way out. Maybe the Colossus is not going to be too far behind. GuMiho, of course, a world-class Terran player. Not to be underestimated. He knows what he needs to do and how he can get the job done. But I can imagine if you're a pro gamer and you're going up against one of your main competitors off races and you're actually losing the series as far as the map score goes. That is shaky. Nice spotting right here as well by Clem. He actually sees that move out. Okay, GuMiho knows he's been spotted as well. He must have seen at least the Zealots, but maybe the Observer too. Decides to unload the units once more. I think what you can do here as Gumi is wait until these upgrades are done and just chill for a bit. Get the Vikings going, wait until your upgrades kick in, and then try your hand rather, at pushing once more. Has he seen the base at the bottom? Well, now he does. He's checking whether or not the gold base could be taken as well with this type of scan. Rocks are gonna get knocked down. Terran, though, just about to hit a big power spike. Those 2-1 upgrades make all the Marines and Marauders stronger. Here's the reinforcing troops coming in too. Clem sprinkling a couple of units around the map, including a probe over here to see this army. There are now 2 Colossi, but one of the Colossi is actually on the wrong path here. It is gonna get picked off what seems to be for free. Another Colossus, the third one, just popped out. Nice targeting right here with those Stalkers. But GuMiho is just clearing out all those units, and now he's also flanking this army from the left side. Vikings from the front, Marines, Marauders from the right. At least the Marauders on the left are being pushed away. But it's looking to me like GuMiho's army is just a little bit too big. Although this is about the 4th time that I've said that so far in this game. I think this time around, though, it is actually true. Yeah, there's a lot of Terran still streaming across. And this base is in a world of trouble. Clem's army supply has plummeted all the way back down to just 6. It's GuMiho who evens up the score. Alrighty. That means that it all comes down to this. Game number 5 is on Abyssal Reef. If GuMiho wins this game, he's the winner of HomeStory Cup 26. If Clem wins this map, we're doing one more best of 3 to decide it all. This is a large map. A map that is, I mean, it's both new as well as old. It was played in the early days of Legacy of the Void, but it hasn't been in the map pool in many, many years. And even though a lot of players will remember some of the strats that they used to play here, it's also something that is gonna require a little bit more practice. I would imagine in general in these sort of uncertain times, it's probably GuMiho who feels a little bit more comfortable. Because GuMiho is somebody who shines. Well, in general, he's very good at the game, but he shines especially when a new patch hits. Very creative, and you should be able to make use of all of this pathing that you have, right? There's a lot of movement, a lot of alleyways, a lot of corridors. Then again, this map feels huge to me. The rush distance is absolutely massive. Prop is going to be able to get across the map relatively quickly, but it is a double gas opener here for Gumi, so the command center on the low ground is not going to be blocked. Instead, we'll see a relatively quick factory on the back of this. GuMiho, by the way, not really somebody who scouts much in this matchup early on. Very little SCV scouting. If ever. Clem just following this up with the good old standard. This finals is interesting to me, though, because there's been this ongoing discussion whether or not Protoss is too weak at the highest level. And looking at this particular series so far, yes, Clem has lost 2 maps, but I feel like both of the maps were actually quite preventable. Like that previous game, he chose the wrong build order against the strategy that GuMiho was going for. In his defense, it's an uncommon build from Gumi. But I think with a little bit of practice, honestly, if they play the exact same strategy again, if they replay that map, there's a very good chance that Clem would come out on top. And it's the same for the other map that he lost. Just, I mean, it's not like GuMiho is playing poorly by any stretch of the imagination. It just seems that Clem just doesn't have the bank of knowledge that he really needs in order to play against the top tier Terran here. Obviously, he also won 2 maps, and the 2 that he won were very dominant. In a straight-up game, it seems to be that Clem may just have GuMiho's number. Now, it is also important to note that GuMiho's Terran versus Protoss is considered to be his weakest matchup. His TVZ is really good, his Terran versus Terran is really good too. But he's always felt a little bit shaky, over the last year or at least, in TVP. Trying to see if he can get us around right here on that Reaper, but GuMiho already snaking the unit away. There's Blink once more. And we do have a Cyclone on the back of this. This is just a good old Marine Medevac start right here for Gumi, with once more a Cyclone, so nothing out of the ordinary. Not feeling like he needs to do anything cheesy once again, or maybe not cheesy, maybe cheeky is a better word to describe it. At least not when it comes to the very first structures. Clem going for a Robo again. We should be seeing an Observer into a Prism. Could also go for a faster Robo Bay if he wants to, but this is going to be... Well, for now it's actually only 2 gateways. 3rd gateway is coming up. Can't count. For some reason I thought there were only 2 gateways. But there is a 3rd one. Instead we're going to go for a relatively quick 3rd Nexus as well. Cyclone right now at the front is hunting down that Adept. Oh, bit of a misrally. This should not be here. Nope, this is a free Adept donation. Unnecessary movement right there by Clem. He does not yet have Blink, but he needs to slow down this attack. This actually has a lot of potential. GuMiho has fantastic micro with those units. You need to respect this. This is a siege tank follow-up too. So this is very quick siege tank play by GuMiho. Not transitioning towards a Raven or anything like that. There's a Viking right now too. Vikings, of course, can deal a ton of damage to, well, Stalkers if they're landed on the ground. It's now being used mostly to provide high ground vision. Siege tank over there in the back. A couple SCVs also coming to the front to try and repair those units. One of the gateways goes down. Clem decides to blink down towards the low ground. Nice pickup control right here by GuMiho. Do you go for the medevac? Do you go for the siege tank itself? All of the Stalkers in the meantime are getting torn apart by the Viking Marines and that Cyclone itself. Clem has just lost all of his army units, and what looked like a normal start to a game right here from GuMiho turned out to be non-stop unit production instead. None of those Ravens on the back of this, none of that quote-unquote normal aggression. Instead, we have a very aggressive two-base push with very fast siege tanks and some phenomenal micro. It's GuMiho who's the champion of HomeStory Cup 26 and also HomeStory Cup 25 going back to back. Interestingly enough, by the way, one of the units that is most complained about in this particular matchup is the Ghost. Have we seen a single Ghost in this series? I think not.